What woke me was the sound of him moving around downstairs. I knew it was him from the gurgling way he breathed, not to mention the unmistakable slowness of his gait. Beside me, Carl remained in a deep sleep. From the kitchen, I heard the clatter of cupboard doors opening and closing, then the tinkle of our glassware being probed. Only briefly did I entertain the idea of ditching Carl to make my escape, either by flinging myself from the window or hiding in the closet. But even as I visualized these scenes in my mind, I could feel how false they were. I knew that most people in my position would have opted for the panic now, think later approach, but I wasn't most people, and neither, it seemed, was the man downstairs.
Hello, everyone. My name is Sarah Edmonds. I'm the editor-in-chief of For Page and Screen magazine. I'm here today with Alex Clements, author of The Intruder, which we had the honor of publishing in our sixth issue. Thank you so much for being here with me today.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Of course. Now, just to start off, could you tell me a little bit about what inspired this story?
Yeah, well, it was funny. I wasn't planning it or anything. I was actually ironing, of all things, and I think my mind was just wandering. And it's rare when this happens, but it was the first line of the story came just into my head, pretty much as close to the final as can be, really. And yeah, I decided to just go with it. I left the ironing, I went to the computer and wrote down. And it was one of those experiences, the wonderful, like rare ones, where I didn't really stop. For about an hour or two, I wrote the whole story. Obviously, it was a very long and rough version of it, but yeah, the bones were there. But I think because that happens a lot, like a idea will come to me or like an image or whatever. But the reason I really wanted to follow this one up was because I was genuinely interested in the voice. I wanted to know, I think, number one, who was the intruder? Why was this happening? But the second thing, and most important, I think, was why, because I could hear it straight away, why the character was so relaxed, almost receptive to what was happening. So, yeah, I just wanted to explore that, I think.
It's interesting to me that those are kind of the two things you wanted to focus on because we never really get the answer to that first question. We never really get the answer to the intruder. So what made you take that route since that was one of the questions you were kind of considering working through?
Um, a lot of it wasn't really planned. As I said, it was very much just going with it the first time. And see, the first one, it was a lot longer, if you can imagine, at least 3,000 longer. I really did ramble. So I had to cut that down. But essentially, I think the reason it went the way you just said is because during that initial process where it's much longer, um, it went way more into the narrator, and I just became way more fascinated by, as I said before, kind of why he just did not care. If anything, he was actually excited what was happening. Um, so yeah, when I went into it, even though those were my first kind of major questions, wanting to know what happened, I kind of think I led it a different way because I liked the mystery of it. Maybe it was more about his reaction and response that interested me.
Yeah, and I love the fact that the approach that you've taken with this story is kind of unexpected for what we think of a story about a break-in. We think of, okay, it's going to be action, people are going to be terrified, there's going to be fast-paced things happening. This is very much not that. And I think that's why it's so unique and why it works so well, having that introspective kind of almost stream of consciousness narration going on throughout the story. Is that something that you use a lot in your writing? Do you frequently kind of take that introspective approach, or is this more unique in that regard?
Um, well, thank you for saying that. I appreciate that. Well, as you can probably imagine, I mean, you probably get a lot of stories so you can see it can go wrong, and certainly it usually does for me. I think my my initial desire is to do what you just said, but obviously in certain stories that doesn't work. And you'll get feedback saying you need to draw it out more. So I think the reason it worked here and I was able to like really run with that is because it was a lot shorter. And it did, I think, fit the kind of strange, almost like surreal nature. I wanted it to be that blend of like a little bit of surrealism in his reaction, but also humor. So yeah, it's something that, for better or for worse, it that is always, I guess, my inclination when starting a new story. But I have to kind of pull it back a little bit depending on the narrative. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, there are definitely. I feel like it's something that could easily go wrong. I feel like it's something I've fallen into as well, kind of getting into that and being like, wait, has to go a different direction or have to pull it back. Um, I want to talk about the humor in this story as well, because it does add this kind of surreal element. I know, um, I'll be completely honest, I would probably act like the narrator if I were in this situation, because it's like, okay, what am I going to actually do? Like, am I actually going to do anything? I don't know. I'm just going to sit here and think about it. Um, but the humor is an interesting touch again and kind of goes against convention. I'm trying to figure out a way to phrase this as a question. With the humor element, did you have a specific goal for that? Like as you were revising, I know you said you kind of just went with it in the beginning. Did you want to kind of heighten that to create the contrast? Did it just kind of feel natural as you were going through? Kind of what was your mindset with that?
I think it was kind of unconscious actually, because as I said, the idea gripped me from the start that he was just so relaxed. It kind of made me laugh. I thought it was funny. So it wasn't necessarily an intention from the start to make that side of it funny. It just was already there. Um, but in hindsight, and when I write other things, it's not incredibly surprising because I am always attracted to that kind of character, I think. Like I love things like Artessa Moshfegh and Miranda July, Joy Williams, and you know that kind of like frankness and the bluntness, and also just their I like characters where there was sometimes they're in a very like normal situation and their reaction to it is strange or the reverse, and that's kind of what happens here. You know, it's a high tense situation, but he's not having the reaction you'd expect. So I think the humor can come through that. So no, I think it's just a part of me in that sense, really. Yeah.
Fair enough. And I think it's a great kind of skill and element to have too, especially when you're dealing. I feel like this story runs the line of being humorous and also kind of profound in a way, the kind of reflection that comes in at the end, and also just kind of forcing the reader to be like, okay, what would you actually do? Um, and I think that being able to balance that is a huge asset as a writer, especially when dealing with short fiction where you have to get the reader invested immediately, when you have to get them to care quickly. So yeah, there's no question tied to that. I just think it's great.
I appreciate that though. I do. I get what you mean. Because I've had the experience when I've read or watched whatever medium it is before. And I like that because it's about interpretation, isn't it? Some people would come away and think this character, whoever it is ridiculous. But find it funny, so they've still got enjoyment from it. And other people, yeah, can have more of a deeper meaning, like you've said. So yeah, I definitely relate to that though. Yeah.
Definitely, definitely. Now, do you kind of primarily work in short fiction, or do you kind of experiment with length, genre, that kind of thing?
It's interesting because I've written for a long, long time, all through university and things, and used to write novels actually. I wrote maybe like a handful of them, but the thing is, I get when I said about the mind wandering thing, I don't know if I have ADHD, so I don't know if that comes into it, but I love the initial process. But the editing used to really overwhelm me, and I would have these like novels that are the first draft or second draft and just haven't gone any further. Anyway, and then it was shortly after the pandemic, something just made me think, oh, I'll give short stories a go. So I've been doing that for a few years now, and in some ways, it actually helps with the problem I just mentioned because I don't have as much freedom, which can be a good thing sometimes. I've got to rein myself in. So yeah, it's something I'm primarily in at the moment, definitely. That's where my focus is right now, yeah.
Nice, nice. And could you tell me a little bit about how you got into writing in general? You said you've been doing it a while. How did you get started?
Yeah, probably a similar story to a lot of people you speak to. I mean, it's the cliche thing that I always wanted to be involved in writing, but also books and everything since I was super young. And then as I got older, I wrote things here and there. I don't think I took it as seriously until maybe I was like late teens, 20s. And then at university and things, I was in they did like a creative writing society thing. Um, and then Yeah, I think when you're at uni, you have to think, I guess, about what you really want to do, what you want to pursue seriously. So that's when I took it more serious. But there wasn't like one moment that kind of pushed me into it. I think it was just something I always felt pulled to. I mean, my mind's always been like, even when I was young, like just constantly just saying random things to people. I mean, I was thinking earlier because I was looking at your old episodes and when you said about inspiration. And I was thinking about, as I said to you, there wasn't an inspiration really behind this. It was just an idea that come to me. And as I said, sometimes it's a line, sometimes it's an image, but often it's like a what if thing. Most of the stories I wrote are more of like a what if question. And yeah, like I've done that since I was a child. I just randomly like ask people around me, what would you do if this happened? What would you do if this happened? So I just channel it into writing, I think now, which is a better outlet probably. So yeah.
Can always still ask people the question randomly, keep them on their toes. Yeah, so with the kind of development, you mentioned kind of being involved in creative writing groups at school, um, or just in general. I don't remember. Sorry, I don't remember if you said it was at school or not. Um, do you kind of work on your own with your writing, or are you still part of those groups? Do you work collaboratively at all in any way?
No, it's something I'm kind of interested in. I've thought about that before. A long time ago, I had a close friend and there was maybe a collaborative thing that was more when we were trying out poetry and things. But it was more, I think, what's the word? Like almost like a work buddy, someone to like ensure you're doing, because it's easy to say, I'll do it tomorrow, I'll do it tomorrow. So it was more that that was good to start the building blocks of having discipline. And yeah, when I was in undergrad study at uni, which was quite a few years ago now, that's when I did the society. But since then, no, it's been on my own. I think about this a lot though, because when I look online, you see a lot of advice saying join a group, and I feel like in America and things, it's a lot more common. Where here, it's more spread out. Um, but I do see the benefits of it. But at the moment, it's just me, quite solitary. But that's probably good because then I can focus and things. So yeah.
Yeah, I definitely feel like sometimes there are pros and cons to everything. Um, and maybe in the future, a
Yeah.
group will call to you. I will say, I think all but two people I've spoken to in this interview series so far have been from the UK. So if you all want to meet up and like band together,
Hey, wow.
um, no, I don't know. Um,
I didn't realize that. That's interesting. Wow.
yeah, I've honestly been surprised of it. I did not realize we published that many authors from the UK. I'm like, oh, cool. I love it. I love it. It's fun. Makes scheduling difficult, but it's fun.
I can imagine. Yeah.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about publication. What's your kind of approach to getting stories published? Is it something that you spend a lot of time working on? Is it just kind of here or there? What are your thoughts? Very broad question.
Um, well, I think in a way, I mean, I overthink a lot of things, but in a way, it kind of ties to what you said before because I don't have like a writing group right now or anything. You are kind of, I mean, I have people around me that I've asked to like read work and things, but overall, you are going it alone, aren't you? So, um, as I said, because I'm inclined to overthink, with a story like the one you published, actually, that went through so many rounds because I finished it and then I submitted it and I saw like, I don't know, 10, 15 rejections and was like, okay, there's something wrong with it. And I left. It goes back to that thing I said before when I was writing novels. I moved on to another story and I was like, I can't find the time. Um, but eventually, anyway, it kept like calling to me and I went back to it and then I just, I read more and I understand that you need to submit a lot and it's about timing and everything. So I feel like I'm still kind of learning with it. Like in the beginning I wasn't very organized. Like I just had like a note on my like Mac and stuff on my phone, the notes app, and I just would list where I've submitted and then strike through it if it got rejected. Now I have like an Excel spreadsheet, so that's a bit more helpful. Um, and I actually watched a previous episode recently of your podcast, and someone on there said about chill. Is it chill subs? Is that what it's called? I think that's how I found your publication. Like when I was doing this story, yeah, that was very helpful because it can be overwhelming. There's so many out there, isn't there? So the main way I go about it is I put in the word count, my genre, and then see what's there and see if it's a good fit, and then send it. But yeah, it's hard to be organized, I think, sometimes with this kind of thing. But yeah.
Yeah, I have so many spreadsheets. Like it's kind of a problem. They're getting disorganized at this point. But absolutely. It can be a lot. It can be a lot. Do you have kind of set criteria that you look for in a magazine? This is me selfishly asking what we can do to be more attractive to authors. But what do you kind of do when you're considering a magazine for your story?
That's a good question. It does kind of change depending on how long the story is. As I said, do you know, I went back to this like the Word document for it, so I could see the word count because I forgot, and I was shocked that I think it's just over 2.5, isn't it, thousand? Most of mine, my God, they're like so long. I have to really cut them down. This was, as I said, almost 5,000 when it started. So that already cuts me off from a lot, of course. I have to find ones that suit that. And then often it's like an intuition thing, to be honest. There's certain things that just I know you can only do so much because I mean, they've got so many people coming to their websites, but some just feel a little bit cold, a little bit intimidating. But if it's like warm and you feel like they're genuinely interested in the work, yeah, uh, I think that's it. There are some I noticed as well that it seems like it's very difficult to. There's like so many barriers and things, and that can kind of get overwhelming. So I'll just move on to another one and come back later. So yeah, it's just about the feel, I think, of the website and what they've published before, things like that.
Cool, cool. Yeah, this is just me personally. I do kind of a similar thing. Like I just kind of scroll through. I'm like, okay, like what do you publish? Like what's your vibe? That sounds weird to say, but it's very much on vibes. Um, and yeah, yeah. So I'm glad to hear that we have good vibes.
No, definitely,
Apparently.
definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I want to kind of talk a little bit about more about your work in general. Are there any themes that you find yourself kind of returning to? I know you said you kind of go to the what if question, but beyond that, is there anything you kind of really love to work with? Anything you want to work more with in the future? Anything like that?
Um, that's a good question. I mean, it is kind of to an extent, even though it sounds like a lazy answer, it is unconscious. So it's not necessarily I want to pursue this thing. Um, Oh, there's so many ways to answer it because I mean I have like a mammoth list of things where I've had ideas. So there's choice there. If I'm finishing a project and I want to start something new, I might look at that and think what's different to what I've done before, or whatever. But usually it is, as I said at the very beginning, about the voice. But it is interesting, like when I look then over at work I've done, sometimes certain themes do come through. Um, but again, a bit like when I said about the theme of this, what interests me most is about like characters reacting to kind of slightly strange situations and the way they are responding to that. Um, I like putting them into quite strange situations and having them react quite calmly, like this guy in The Intruder. But yeah, in terms of like actual direct themes and stuff, it's there's a lot of like gay relationships come through a lot in them, like in this one, but often it's more background, which just to bring that kind of it's not the main focus if that makes sense. It's just something that's just like normalized and all that. So that is something that seems to crop up and up. But then yeah, I think I mean I've wrote stories as well. Often a lot of do you know actually there is an answer. Because a lot of the stories I was originally writing, the voices were always coming through as female. And I thought that was interesting. And then I thought I need to try more with male. And when The Intruder, come through, I could just tell it was male straight away. And I think it is in the original story, the mention of Carl sleeping next to him, is like line three. So I knew at that point it was just two men. So yeah, there was that choice, I guess. But overall, it really is just an unconscious thing and what feels right at the moment.
That's interesting to me that you kind of found yourself writing for like female narrators. I just say that because I kind of had the opposite thing when I started out writing. I found myself continually writing male characters. I'm like, I need to not do this, or I need to at least experiment and kind of build out from this. So it's interesting to me how sometimes authors kind of have their defaults that they have to then not push past, but move forward to. Um, with Speaking of like kind of determining what voice you want your narrator to have, this story is in first person. Do you write frequently in first person? Do you experiment? And if you stick with first person, how do you go about kind of determining the external factors of the narrator? That's a weird question. I'm hoping it makes sense.
No, I get you. Yeah. It is very common that I'll write in first. Yeah. And going back again to the previous question about choice, so I make going in something, I have tried before to experiment in, say, third. Um, yeah. I mean, there was a story, I'm still kind of editing it because, like I said, constantly overthinking things and just not willing to submit it straight away. But that was kind of more of like a we story. So it was narrated by like say like a neighborhood or whatever. That was really fun because that it was after writing quite a few stories in a row that were first, it was like eye-opening really how much freedom you get from that. But I think first is definitely my favorite because you're just so much in their head. In terms of the external that you mentioned, do you mean like the other characters and their environment and things?
Yeah, I guess like that as well as kind of reflections. Because I'm always interested. I don't write in a lot of first persons. When I meet people who do, I'm like, I love talking about it. Because I think it's interesting how it's the narrator is kind of only shown through their own perspective, and having the contrast between their perspective and how other people see them is interesting to me. And of course, here in the story, we kind of only have the narrator. But in general, how do you kind of show that contrast, if you show that contrast at all? Kind of get outside of the narrator's head in that way.
Yeah, that is really interesting. Because I mean, less so in a short story, although it is possible. But I was going to say, you then something I find interesting about, like what you said, how other people see the character. I still wonder. You can overthink it, but like, can you even trust those other people's opinions? Because it still is coming through the narrator, and that's where the unreliable narrator comes in and things. So all of that is very interesting to me. But I mean, in this story, obviously, it was a lot more limited because it is so interior, and it is just him in this room. There's a couple of like flashbacks and things, but even that you could, if you wanted to have like a literature class level discussion on it, is his portrayal of the past events accurate or not? Who knows? Especially when he is responding. Again, it's so you can keep going into different layers because if you just take on the surface how he's responding to this quite scary in most people's opinion, uh, and he's so chill, you could say, well, I don't trust his portrayal of other events, you know. But I mean, in general, like one story I'm working on at the moment that is first person, but it definitely concerns another character as well. That's more about like pitting two characters together that are so different. The main character, he's very shy and like internal, and the other person is very complete opposite. So that's interesting to see it that way. But I think when it comes to, especially again, a short story, when I'm more limited, which is sometimes a good thing, questions of how much detail do I want to give to the external and say what the other characters think of them is dependent on the story, I think. Which is why, like in this story, as I said, it wasn't there as much. It was more up to the readers because it's part of the overall interpretation, I think. Um, but yeah, it's interesting. I think it's something I'm constantly kind of thinking about because again, it goes back to what we said at the start about being too interior. I think that's linked to the first person. It's very easy to just give just his perspective and nothing else, which could be dangerous in other stories, you know? So it's kind of like a minefield. You have to be careful what choices you're making throughout.
Definitely, definitely. Now you mentioned, I know you said you were still kind of like working on this, but you mentioned writing a story that was kind of more we, and I love that. Obsessed with that. I actually recently taught Brian Evenson's No Matter Which Way She Turned, I believe is what it's called, and the whole story is we, written as we from the perspective of this town. You don't have to talk about it too much if you want to kind of keep it on the down low as you work through it. But I'm curious, just why, I'm trying to figure out a way to phrase this. Um, so as you're working through that, kind of, we'll start with a general question. Like, what's the biggest challenge of kind of taking that on, that perspective on?
Um, there was a few. I mean, again, because I'm probably so much more familiar with first person. Um, I mean, I know in writing you can. There's no rules really. You can break the rules, but obviously there's certain things I would overthink. How much detail can I give? Say you were one of the characters. I was talking about an editor or something in this town. I kind of would question, well, how much detail can I give before it starts to feel like they're in the room with them. But and you can do that, but see, this story is more about what can I say? It's about like a whole group of people looking back on something that happened a while ago. So a lot of it is reliant on like whispers and rumors, and he had this, and we saw this happen in the news, and this is how he responded. Again, it's a bit like that unreliable thing again. So that allows you to break the rules in some ways. You know, you can say what was going on in this person's room, or even their thoughts to an extent, but that's another thing. I didn't want to be too much saying, oh, when this happened, they were thinking this, because how would the people know that? It's about asking those questions whenever I was depicting a certain event that was happening in all of this. I'm trying to continually bring it back to the overall perception of the narrators, if that makes sense, as they remember it, as a group rather than individual people within that group. If that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely does. Um, it sounds very challenging. It sounds like a fun challenge in my opinion, but maybe that's just me. Sometimes I write things and I'm like, why am I writing this? But yeah, absolutely. And is there anything that's been especially freeing, like the opposite side of the coin? Anything that's been especially enjoyable, easy with taking up that perspective?
Um, Well, kind of the opposite of, as like with anything, there's always going to be pros and cons, but the opposite of what I was just saying, it was incredibly freeing, yes, because you can just it's kind of hard to say without talking about the story too much, but like it's because it's a point in time, like
Mhm.
controversial point in time, and everyone also the story is kind of about how this event changed them. You know, they went through this big thing, um, and how it changed them, but then they need to be honest with themselves about how it changed them, blah blah blah,
Mhm.
because they're kind of realizing it as the story goes on themselves. So it was freeing in that sense because when you remember these past events, as I said, you can almost have like a bird's eye view of it. You haven't got to worry about too much of, am I giving too much detail here or whatever? Because no, it's something they've all seen and heard about. So, and again, the unreliability of it, is this person's opinion of what happened accurate? That's fine because it contributes to the overall uh, mystery, but also it was about their hypocrisy. That's what it was about, actually. Like,
Mhm.
they think they remembered it a certain way, but really it's about their own biases coming through, etc., etc. So no,
Mhm.
it all of that to say it was freeing. Yeah.
It sounds interesting. I really hope that you let us know when it's done, when it's published, because I would love to read it. I would love to see the final product. And speaking of which, do you have any stories coming out soon or any announcements that you want to share with our listeners, things they can go find, read, etc.?
Well, I did have a story published in the latest issue of the Literary Hatchet, just at the end of last month. That's called Music Man. I think it was issue 39. That's the most recent one. That just came out. And yeah, I'm working on like two things at the moment, so it's just about I need to I think it will get easier each time, but I need to get more comfortable just letting things go. So saying it's done, it's time, you can submit it now. But yeah, so um I guess watch this space for those two. But in terms of most recent, yeah, Literary Hatchet, issue 39 is the most recent.
Awesome. And we can link that as well in the description. Um, how do you decide when a piece is done? How do you kind of make that decision? Like, okay, this is ready to go out into the world.
I'm still kind of figuring that out genuinely. I don't know. I mean, I've honestly like Googled that and like looked at favorite writers of mine, their interviews asking that question, and I still feel like I haven't got any further. I mean, there is a feeling, yes, but then I think when I keep saying overthink, overthink, but with writing, I definitely do because it is so um subjective. I mean, there's even stories I love, and I've seen like, I mean, they do it in like literature classes sometimes or writing classes. They will say, "Could we edit this down?" And these could be like award-winning stories. So you think that could, I guess, you could argue, no story's ever done. It's never perfect. There's always. So it's about the challenge I find is to have that part of my brain that says, "Well, there could be more to change or cut or whatever." Um, so what do I do? I mean, it's when I'm reading through it enough, and also I've whittled it down enough because, like I said, word count is always huge for me in the early drafts. And just feeling really good about how it sounds out loud. Um, if I can, as I said, let some people read it. But yeah, it's kind of just again, I said it before, but intuition, really, a gut feeling. Yeah.
Definitely. I feel like it's hard to take that step and be like, now it can go out into the world. Now it can be free. Um, Yeah, I know. I kind of have a similar approach. Like once it's done, it's done. Like once I've read over it so many times, and I'm like, this is as good as I can make it. That's when it's done. Of course, that always changes as you become a better writer, and then it goes on and on. Um, but yeah, with the you said that you kind of start with longer drafts and then whittle them down. Would you ever consider, and this is totally out of left field question, would you ever consider taking kind of the longer versions and turning them into a collection of some sort?
Like a collection of stories, you mean? Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I mean, yeah, I mean, I love right. Well, I shouldn't say I love writing longer fiction, but like it just I think is naturally what happens because I mean, this is me trying to like censor myself. As you can probably already hear my answer, I just ramble and ramble and ramble. So my writing is like that times a million. As I said, this story, I mean, it was about 5,000 to begin with, which when I reread that recently, I was like, how was it like that? So I think if you'd asked me that a couple of years ago, I would have been like, yep, definitely. But I think it's actually been a good lesson, that there is a lot that can be cut and the story still remains. That's the challenge. However, yes, I do love writing longer things. And this a story I'm one of the stories I'm working on right now, like editing, that was a story that I wrote in a similar burst, like over a few days, and it come out at like something ridiculous, like 14,000. And so I just put it aside. And even though I loved the story, I was too overwhelmed by the task I knew was ahead of me, like cutting that down to 5 to 6,000. But I've been doing that for like the last few months, and it is down to I think about seven now. So that's been a good lesson. But I think certainly there are some stories that I know just in my heart that if they were to say be published, and it was a someone was saying, it can be whatever, that some of them do have to be a little bit longer because that's just how they are. But it's just I don't want to fall into the trap of allowing myself that escape every single time and saying it's done because I know if I'm honest, like I love George Saunders and he talks about this so much. Like you can always cut, like the cutting exercises he talks about on his Substack and things are just so useful. It's something for me anyway because I write so much words, rambling, rambling. It's useful to keep that in mind, I think, and always be challenging myself. Can you cut more? Like that.
Yeah. That's one of the kind of hardest things I think for any writer, for many of the writers I've spoken to, for myself, is kind of becoming okay with taking those cuts and saying it might actually be better without some of these things. You had mentioned kind of following along with different Substacks, like author interviews, that kind of thing. Do you have any resources that you would recommend to other writers that if they're looking for like information on how to improve their craft?
Um, that's a really good question. I mean, there are a lot out there, but the one, yeah, I definitely would return to the most is George Saunders' Substack, as I say. Um, I think it's called, God, I'm actually spacing on it. I think it's Story Club, I think it's called. Um, but yeah, for anyone not familiar, he just takes a story and then they spend a few weeks, like there's a few newsletters every week, just breaking it down and talking about it. Um, but I just his stuff. I don't know how much if you've read much of his, but I think it is invaluable. He did another book before that called "Swimming in the Pond in the Rain," which is that he analyzes, I think, like four or five Russian short stories. That's like an actual book he published doing this. And then there's like exercises in it, and he talks about like techniques and how they make. And it's interesting because they're like still relevant today, like the story techniques and things. And on the Substack, he's also like uploaded some of his own stories and shown early drafts, which again, because I write so much and my early drafts are chaotic, I found that really helpful to see that a lot of people start out like that. So yeah, I think that's my number one. Yeah, because if you, I mean, I just like watching interviews anyway. Like if I like a writer or a filmmaker, whatever, I just kind of will go down a rabbit hole watching their interviews. But in terms of using that for writing advice, I think it's that classic thing of if it's help. I think George Chandler says this actually. If it's helpful, take it, but leave everything else, because otherwise you can get overwhelmed and there's vying opinions, isn't there? So it's just what you find helpful, I think.
Yeah, that's fantastic advice. I tend to tell my students a similar thing when because in the class format, like they write their stories and then their last kind of workshop is take something you've written, revise it based on feedback and like resubmit it. And I try to tell them when they go through those edits, like you don't have to take every single critique, like even like, you don't have to take all of my critiques, you don't have to take all of your classmates' critiques. Whatever works for you in the story you want to tell is what you keep. So it's kind of like a version of that. So I love that advice. I think that's
Yeah.
great.
It can be difficult as well because, as we said before, writing is so subjective. What one person loves, another person might not, and then you can get too in your head about what to. I really it resonates what you said because recently, actually, I submitted a story and I got two pieces of feedback from the two main editors, and they were so different. One said like, "Oh, I'm putting this around the team. I want to publish this," and he like was really complimentary. And then the other one was nice, but he like was quite. I mean, I'm glad, but he was quite critical about certain parts. And I thought that was so interesting because it shows how different the two things are. And you could argue, well, who do you listen to? Because, like you said with your students, if you listen to all of it it can get overwhelming. So I think again, I know it's easy answer, but it's that intuition thing we said about with a lot of it.
Absolutely. And we kind of have the same thing happen kind of on the editorial side here, because all of our editors vote and we have a little Google spreadsheet and we have comments on the side. And we come up with ties. People will be like, oh, I really love this. And other people are like, I don't really like this. Or even just generally people be like, hard yes, hard no, or kind of, sort of, maybe. And it's hard to kind of make that call because we all have such vastly different editorial tastes. And which is why I think some of our issues are like aliens questioning life, like a very big contrast there. It's kind of a symptom of that. Um, but when it comes to kind of the worst part of the job, sending out rejections, we do like to give editorial feedback on our rejections, and it's usually very, very short. We just don't have the time to give more than a few lines, unfortunately. But it's hard because I always try when I'm writing those emails, 'cause I have to write all of the emails and it breaks my heart. Um, when I'm writing those emails, I have to kind of frame it. I'm like, this is just our opinion. Like other people feel differently, and it sounds cliche. As someone who's gotten those rejections, like it sounds cliche, but it's so true. That it's just a matter of taste. It's just a matter of like, oh, this happens to work at the moment. This doesn't. It might work a week from now. It might not. Um, and it's hard to do that as an editor, but it's also kind of been invaluable just personally. This is just me rambling, but just personally for me as a writer, kind of seeing that because, especially if someone's just starting out, like you take the rejections really hard and they're not personal. They're just a symptom of people having different tastes, and that's really all it is. It's hard to
Yeah.
remember that sometimes. Mhm.
Yeah, I think that's when, like you said before about writing groups, things they could be helpful because you get more perspective.
Mhm.
Um, it's very easy, like you said, when you're starting out, especially, it's very vulnerable, isn't it? And if you're getting all these rejections, they could be that they all thought it was good writing, but they just get hundreds or thousands, whatever. Where I guess if you had a writing group, if everyone hates it, maybe you need to do more work on it. But yeah, it's hard when you're just basing it just off of the rejections or acceptances of a piece of submitted work.
Hmm. Hmm. Definitely, definitely. And I feel like it's harder sometimes with longer works too. Like if you're querying novels versus short stories, just because, I don't know, you spend so much time on a novel, it feels even more personal. So that's a tangent. Um,
No, I agree though.
mhm, yeah.
So
Definitely. So, really quickly, I'd like to check in with everyone kind of as we near the end-ish area of the interview. Is there anything specifically that you want to talk about that we haven't talked about yet?
not really. I think you've covered everything.
Okay,
No.
cool, cool. Then I have two questions remaining. We can jump in. The first is simple. Do you have an author website or social media where listeners can follow you to kind of find your stories, keep up to date on your work?
I was scared you was going to ask this. No, I mean, again, it's one of these things that I've put on, again, ADHD, but I've put on the back burner. I should do. I don't have social media, but I should have a website. I do keep thinking this. So maybe in the in the near future. Yeah. So I'm a bit of an enigma at the moment, I'm afraid. But yeah, as I said, I mean, this is here and the most recent story that I mentioned in the Literary Hatchet. So they're floating around. So, but website in the future, hopefully.
Okay, cool, cool. And if slash when you make one, you can always email me and I'll attach the link to the bottom of the
Oh, thank you.
interview. I can
Appreciate
always edit that at any time. But I will link the other story. I can definitely do that. So they'll be able to find something. Um, awesome. And that leads me to my last question. It's a little cliche, and I ask it of everyone. If you could give one piece of writing advice to other writers out there, what would it be?
Um, okay, mine answer sounds cliche, but honestly, it's just keep writing. And the reason I say that is because, like I said with this story, so I have a list of things that I've written of different lengths, sometimes just a line. And it was only that day, it's hilarious that I've mentioned it three times, but that I was ironing, I could just stop that. But if I hadn't returned to it, we wouldn't be having this conversation. It wouldn't have been published. There's been so many stories where I thought, like, what will this turn into? And this is probably a great example of it. A guy waking up and saying someone's in the house. Um, I mean, yes, okay, there's lots of ways that could go, but also it's very easy to think, I'm busy, I'm not going to do that. But if you just sit there and go for it, something's going to come out and it links. It's never a problem I've had, fortunately. My problem's more the editing, but a lot of people and writers I've spoke to have said like they're scared of the blank page and they're scared to start because of that. And that's why I think if you can just write anything, again, cliche, but you can't edit a blank page, can you? So it would be just to write. Any idea you have, just get it down. If it sounds terrible, just keep going. At least you have something to edit at the end.
Absolutely. It's the hardest part for a lot of people starting. So fantastic advice. Thank you so much for that advice and for being here with me today. It's been really, really great getting to speak with you.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.